Welcome to the podcast today. My good friend Raullen. He is the co-founder and CEO of IoTeX. Are completely unfamiliar with IoTeX. Give them a brief rundown on what is IoTeX and what are you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack. Glad to be here. So IoTeX, so we started early in the day, 2017 year end, me and two other co-founders. So like the mission for IoTeX is always around deeping. Of course, at the very early days, we don't call it deeping. We call it IoT and the blockchain. But like the basic principle and idea and the mission is about the same, right? So we're building this kind of decentralized infrastructure to connecting like devices or machines, especially you think about in the future, and all the human labor will be kind of replaced by AI, machines, devices eventually, right? So we're kind of creating this infrastructure middle layer in a decentralized fashion to serving like the human society.
So let's think about how this practically works out. So let's imagine our users are completely unfamiliar. Maybe they've heard the Hive Mapper, maybe they've heard a few DePin episodes in the past, but what substantially does IoTeX do? Is this like, hey, we have IoT devices and now they're easily able to be on a particular blockchain? Like, walk them through kind of the user journey.
Exactly, right. So I'm ex-Google, ex-Uber. So usually I like to use Uber to explain how the thing works. So think about Uber right now. It's a company, basically it's a biggest taxi company in the world without drivers, without cars, right? So the same thing will actually apply to us too. So one day, so you have autonomous vehicles. So they're connecting with IoTeX platform, which is a combination of blockchain of some like the off-chain infrastructure as well. So you have a chance to basically having your car making passive income for yourself while you're sleeping, right? So you have the chance to kind of collecting all the data the car collects for you, and you have the final say about you want to monetize the data, you want to erase the data, right? So you want to make good use of data. So this also applies to, for example, other devices too. So for example, you have this like a smart glasses, right? So you use this glass to kind of look around, collecting a lot of data from the real world. That's another thing, like you can connect to the IoTeX platform. Later along, high mapper type of devices, healing type of devices, so on and so forth. That's kind of in the 5G space.
Mhm. Now, a lot of people will associate DePin with maybe Base, but most likely Solana. Talk to us a little bit about, or like users, a little bit about like, okay, why pick IoTeX over one of the like very, I'll call them like very prominent DePin infrastructure pieces?
Oh, so like a Solana and a Base, so they are all like all layer one blockchains, right? They're super fast, decentralized. I personally like them a lot. So we're friends with those teams. So IoTeX, we have our own layer one chain as well, but we do have off-chain infrastructures that support Solana, supports Base chain as well. So we're kind of like a multi-chain or like a chain agnostic, like just growing deep is our mission.
Mhm.
Um, but we're not limited to one chain.
Got it, got it. So okay, we've talked about some of the features. So there's the multi-chain ability, there's on-chain, off-chain infra. Talk to us through a little bit about like how a builder would get started on IoTeX.
Yeah, so usually like we have this go to docs.iotex.io, right? So we definitely like have some hello world examples for people to get started. We have like so many long tail deepin projects that actually are using us because what you can see is in the deepin is very interesting. So like the winner actually takes all the capitals from the market, right? So they actually raise big amount of money, they have a good team, they can do everything about themselves. But DP is not about dominated by like a few players on the market, to me at least, right? I think DP is more about kind of the community, the long tail, the developing countries, right? Serving the people over there. If you think about it, in US we have everything kind of perfectly working in a centralized fashion, but in developing countries, does that work or maybe not, right? So that's why we feel like the DePin is for everybody. We have to serve, those long tail DePin developers and projects well, which they have a very limited capital that translates to talents, translates to productivity they have. But they may have like a demand side. They may have some good ideas, right? That's why we have this if you could like I think one big platform we're doing right now is called Deepin Scan. It's kind of like analogous to CoinMarketCap, but very specifically in the Deepin space. So if you go there as a Deepin developer, so you can find some like a very small but simple and useful device like a services for yourself. For example, like a device management, reward distribution, the minor kind of activities, so on and so forth.
Mhm. Yeah, so let's talk about kind of infrastructure in, we'll call it like the third world. So I live here in Colombia. Let's talk a little bit about like how you see deep in infrastructure helping more developing world countries.
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic as we were having this internal discussion always, right? So for example, in Colombia or maybe like South American countries, maybe you're lacking of like 5G stations or 5G services and coverage, right? But the problem here is they're expensive devices. Can the local people afford to buy like a $2,000 kind of base station, 5G base station, put in your backyard? No, right? So if we have a way to kind of bind the protocol, bind the device to the protocol, then we can introduce another investor. Maybe they're like a rich guy coming from US. They kind of own this device, which has been deployed in Colombia, serving local people, even making some revenue over there, eventually kind of making like as a return to the investment, right? So ideally, we should be working like this way. So if we zoom out a little bit, so basically DePin is a composed of like a labor, land, capital, and devices. Four things, right? And it's rare case that these four things can be happen, or like owned by the same group of people. Usually maybe labor and land are coming from like a local people who's living in the developing countries, for example. The capital is coming from rich countries or like people who live in the rich countries or even rich people who live in other countries, right? And the device is actually coming from the project. So how can we kind of organically combine all the three things together? I think this will make him like a deep in a huge, huge thing
Mhm.
to change the world.
Yeah, so we talked about like telecom. Obviously, we mentioned high mapper with dash cams. What do you think? For people that maybe are less into the deep end space, where do you think like the areas of product market fit are? Is it like hey, dash cams? Is it hey, helium kind of 5G devices? What do you think is really interesting in deep end?
No, I think the really interesting deeping is like a demand side is non-crypto at all, right? So we're talking about transportation like a Uber. We're talking about GPS services, which everybody use almost every day right now. So we're even talking about like a laundry as a service. I saw some companies are actually doing this, right? Like a Uber fashion of laundry. So those things like are just for normal people. They don't have to understand crypto technology, infrastructure, all the jargons we're talking about at all, but they can use it, right? They can use it daily. They can use it like with a lot of happiness.
Yeah, yeah. I remember talking with the team over at HiveMapper, and they were talking about how DePin is essentially like the version two of a cooperative, where like if people are unfamiliar with cooperatives, they're like, hey, I have a certain amount of milk, or I have certain kinds of eggs, and I can exchange those. All of the farms can be like aggregated together to sell in bulk. How do you kind of think about DePin for people that are as not as familiar with like, hey, why is this so important?
Um, so as an everyday person or this group of people, right? All they care about is the quality of the service or
Mhm.
services as well as the price of the services, right? So let's say if we can offer the same quality services as Uber does today, but we have a 20% price cut, that would
Yeah.
be like really appealing to those people. But why can we have 20% cut? Because we're using decentralized system, right? It's a smart contract plus some option services. So they are autonomous. So you don't have to hire so many people kind of form a company doing all the operations in between, but you may have to have some people, of course, to make sure everything's all right. But you can reduce a lot of operation expense here. So you can cut the
So
cost, right?
So skeptics would look at something like Uber and they'd be like, "Well, I mean, if Deepin is so good, like why isn't Uber just adopting it?"
Oh, so that's kind of a long story because they already have everything kind of set up. If
Mhm.
you want fundamentally change our organization, that's kind of hard. That's
Yeah,
against every kind of insider's interest. So that's why it's hard.
got it, got it. So entrenched interests, people in telecom, they're not going to want to uproot their
They're
entire
not. They're not.
business model. Yeah, I remember talking with oh man, Tashar from Multicoin Capital, and he was saying that
That's right.
Helium was rolling out a free plan, so like free cell service under a certain amount of limits, which it really does make you wonder, like how things will look. So, kind of in a forward looking way, if DePin continues to advance, what do you think the future looks like? Is it like Waymo cars that are just, or like community owned cars that are paying the community? Is it 5G stations? Like, where do you think things are going?
I think for the existent services like a Uber 5G or even H,
Hmm.
like a high mapper, like a kind of dash cam, so people will enjoying like a cheaper services with about the same quality, right? Like I said,
Hmm.
20% off. I think that's kind of one thing. But
Yeah.
more interestingly, I think there will be some new kind of sharing economy type of business pops up which we would never saw before. Because if you were doing this like a new things using a centralized kind of company, the operation cost would be too high to make this a sensible kind of business, right?
Hmm.
But using this kind of like an autonomous middle layer, blocks and stuff, those things become make sense. I saw some examples here. For example, WinBits. That's a weird company. So they are actually selling you like the antennas. You're like the antenna is able to like getting the signals from the airplane kind of flew by, right? Then they have like an airplane kind of tracking system. Not sure if you use this something called the flightaware.com. Basically, you can track, oh, this is my flight is getting on time or late, postponed, or whatever,
Mm.
canceled, right? So they're kind of like collecting all the flights data using antennas installed on top of your roof.
Oh.
And then they kind of like processing all the flights data, make them monetizable or profitable, maybe selling to some, I don't know, some other companies to
Mhm.
make money, right? So this type of business will never exist if you have to hire like a 2,000 people kind of working on all those stuff in the middle. But it makes sense in the decentralized world. I
Yeah.
think we will see more and more kind of very niched business kind of
Yeah.
booming in such a deep world.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the long tail. So what kind of projects are already live on IoTeX to further give people an understanding of being like, okay, what can I build here?
Yeah, so we have another project is called environment blocks. So they're collecting environment data and try to monetize that data. That's also very interesting because in the past, right? So you have a very high kind of upfront cost to install sensors in each of the residential houses, then collecting data, trying to sell the data in a way. But now they have like a easy way because people pays the cost of the hardware, right? So that's why it's easy to set up. I think that's an easy one. Another one we saw is like a kind of helium-like company. It's called Drop Wireless. They're doing 5G stuff on IoTeX too.
Mhm.
SoarChain is another one I heard about. They're moving to IoTeX recently. So they're like they're a dashcam high mapper type of company, but like mostly running in Europe.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that
Mhm.
makes complete sense. And now I know you guys have kind of coined the term MachineFi. For people that are unfamiliar with MachineFi, what does it mean? And like, is that just a fancy word for depends, or what are we talking here?
Yeah, that's a long story, right? We actually coined the term machine fi in the year around 2021. We were kind of like thinking even behind the time we were because at that time AI is still nothing, right? Until recently, this ChatGPT everything kind of booming right now, which leads to the thinking about okay, the future belongs to the machine. All the labor force will be machine, right? So if we have this kind of middle layer kind of facilitates the machine with working together, producing like economic returns then this middle layer is super important. So that's kind of like where this machine fight term is coming from in the year of 2021. We have like a high level vision paper about this one. Then in 2022, so I think Masari, especially Sammy from Masari, which is a friend of mine, so they propose this thing called Deepin, which is more specific, right? So compared to this grand, big, futuristic vision of machine fight. So they say, oh, Deepin is such a thing. It's very kind of concrete, small scoped. So we say, okay, let's go. Let's go with you guys. We love Deepin too. Let's just try to making Deepin great. That's where, I think the Deepin as a term gets started.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I remember talking with some
Yeah,
teams that are like, "Hey, we are deep in before deep in existed, before the term
exactly.
existed, and came out from the Masari days." So, deep end's an interesting one because oftentimes you'll hear in crypto, it's like the money's very circular. It's just like crypto people sending money to other crypto people, but deep end kind of crosses the divide to get into that real physical world. Talk to us a little bit about how you like build partnerships both with Web3 companies and even like traditional tech sectors.
Yeah, that's very interesting, right? So that kind of links me to my recent trip to DC actually last week. So I was spending time with some congressmen, congresswomen over there in DC, right? In their Hill office. I feel like Deepin has a really resonates with them because we're talking about like the energy, right? So how can we produce more energies for Colorado because of this decentralized like a solar panel installed on your rooftop? So they are super excited about that, right? So, but if you're talking about, coins, technology consensus, they have no sense about what they are. Another one is agriculture, right? So some of the states, so they're like a very heavy on the agriculture. So we're talking about, oh, if we give you guys some high precision, like a GPS signal from, for example, GeoDNet, which is also partly on IoTeX, right?
Mm,
It will help your like a productivity for your like agricultural like owners in that state. So those
yeah.
conversation gets like a very well received. Um, right.
Now, one thing that I often wonder, and obviously I'm into coins and tokens. I'm obviously very into this Web3 world, but I sometimes wonder if like the tokens and coins actually hold us back. Like, yes, they're great for bootstrapping the network, but then people essentially become beholden to the token price, and then people are like, token down, so I don't
That's
want to
right.
install this decentralized solar panel. Like, what's your general thinking there? Is the future less tokens, or we give people stable coins?
I have a lot of thinkings around this, man. I think for all the crypto projects, right? So the capital injection comes in like a really early. Unlike your IPO, you work on 10
Hmm.
years on thing, you find the market fit, you kind of grow, and then eventually you have IPO capital injection, right? So crypto company almost have capital injection in day one. So that's kind of like a good and bad, right? So good thing is you have some free capital you can use to really build through your vision. Of course, there are some people just like a rocket money and run. That's kind of the downside, right? But
That's
for
true.
like
Yeah.
all yeah, but for all the founders who really want to change your world, you have some free access to the capital. You have to use those capitals very carefully, right? The downside is, of course, like the market it goes down, up and down, especially given the tariff we're talking about right now, the market becomes very volatile. All the crypto assets, was like kind of down, I think, I don't know, 20, 30% within recent 30 days. That gives a lot of distraction to the team as well, because you can feel like team's morale also gets, decreased like a 20, 30% in a way,
Mhm.
right? Not just to us, I think to all the crypto teams. So that's kind of downside. So that's why as a founder, so you have to like manage it like the team or people or community's expectation really, really well while you kind of carefully using this the thing you want to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, the really tricky thing about tokens is, yeah, you end up becoming like a three-sided marketplace. Whereas before, like if we just take an Uber as an example, it's like, hey, we've got the cabs and the users, and then you're like you throw in the token, you're like, oh, now we've got so many different stakeholders. So I'm quite curious, like whether we'll see more platforms in the future, like forego a TGE or do some kind of other type of system in order to supplement, like maybe get some of the benefits of crypto. Like I just don't know if there needs to be 1,000 plus coins, which is tough. Actually, it's probably way higher than this at that point.
But I think the token is definitely like the future. Um, because of the technology advancement, I think everything becomes more democratized in a way.
Yeah.
Our knowledge about the world, right? So if you like information you can access, I think the token thing, the crypto token thing, is try to democratize the capital access to normal people at a very early stage of the company.
Mhm.
I think this will become the norm
Mm,
in next, I don't know, 1 to 3, 3 to 5 years. Become very, very
interesting.
common.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I just wonder because it's like almost most of these tokens end up going to dang near zero, right? So it's
exactly.
like it's really difficult. It's like let's say I'm launching on Solana tomorrow. I'm going to be the Jax protocol. It's like, do I have my own Jax token or do I just use Solana? It would make sense. It's like, but dang, if Solana's price is going down, how do I expect to outmarket them? I don't know. It's just a thing I
Yeah,
think about in these worlds. So, what kind of role
that's
do you
correct.
think? So, we've talked about machines, we've talked about like kind of the future. Where do you see AI starting to fit into the future of IoTeX?
Yeah, so definitely like I mentioned, right? So we're working on this layer because we do think the future belongs to AI, specifically physical AI, right? So there will be
Mm,
super
productive and influential to our existence as a human being. So we kind of kick off like a one small product around this AI agent, which has been like a pretty successful in the past 2 3 months. So this agent is called Bino. It's living on Twitter right now. It's actually completely, working on its own and growing its fans from, I don't know, 0 to 200K, 100K, maybe 50K ish right now, autonomously. So this is amazing. Actually, we're just feeding this AI agent some like a deep in data and deep in knowledge, and it can does its own work. So which is
Yeah.
impressive.
I know it's also kind of depressing when I'm being beaten by a bunch of like AI agents, but I guess that's the future of
That's
everything.
the
So
future. Yeah.
it's the future. Yeah.
So the funny thing about this thing is I think the current AI agent, right? So they have a kind of like a soul of this AI, but they don't have a physical body. And one day, so they will have a physical body. So their soul can actually seamlessly transfer to the physical body and do a lot of things for us. And
Yeah.
I want IoTeX to be ready for that day.
Got it. Got it. Well, what do you think is every time we get down this discussion, people start being like, am I going to lose my job? Like, what's the future? What's the future hold for humans?
Yes, I think everyone, unless you want to work, right? So you don't have to work, right? So I think UBI will become like a real thing.
Yeah,
People,
it has
government
to.
pays you, I don't know, a few some dollars every month. You're just free of, doing whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's going to be a very spooky time. So finally, where can people learn more about IoTeX and like what kind of stuff do you guys have coming up that people can keep an eye out for?
sure. So you can come to our website, which is iotex.io. I think we're pretty active on Twitter too. The handle is iotexio underscore io. I'm sorry, iotex underscore io.
Perfect. And we'll put all the links in the description. Where can they find you on Twitter specifically?
Oh, I'm also pretty active on Twitter. Raullen is my handle.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on here and let's get to building the future of Web3.